Today's guest is Annalie. She runs her business through three key brands: Miss Annalie, Workerby, and Ruby3, with a mix of design and creative work, creative guidance sessions, and human design. In the episode, we talk about how Annalie manages all of this and how she got to where she is today with the creative processes and working with community and connection. Welcome to the podcast, Annalie. It's so good to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to see you. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, so awesome. So Annalie and I met in the Being Boss community. We did a mastermind together, correct?
Yes.
Is that like
yes.
our first kind of big interaction? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So we know quite a bit about each other's businesses. But what I want to discuss today is all of the different ways that you do things. I think in business, we're kind of taught to niche down, and you don't, and I love that.
No.
So what I want to talk about is all of that. But to kick us off, why don't you tell us about your business and yourself and how you do things?
Yeah. Well, I think I've always made things a little more complicated than they needed to be, I think many of us are neurodivergent and we have all of these different things that we pull together. And the nice thing about aging is you start to realize the common threads in the tapestry that you're weaving, right? And I've tried so many different things and been so many different people that I decided to take my business, and I've got a few businesses, but I put them under the umbrella Miss Annalie. And that has just really allowed me to be all of the things and also allow clarity. But I had to figure it out first. So I have one area of my business called Ruby3, and I started that over 20 years ago. And that is my, my design side. I have worked in the fashion industry for over 20 years. And that's where I do my freelance. I also have made hats for many years. And that kind of ebbs and flows. And so if I just have a basket for that, like all my design work, and I'll say it has niched a bit in the fashion industry. I work in fashion accessories. So I've got that bit. I focus on hats and scarves and things like that for myself. And then I have some corporate clients that I work with. So that's its own entity, but I wouldn't be chill just to take that on. I have a branch called Gray Matter series, and it's just a series of collaborations I do with folks. We've done about 4 or 5 of them over the last, I guess you could say, 7 years. And for a while I was doing them every season. It was aligned to the fashion calendar, and I was creating different hat collections. And now it's just turned into like a platform for this other part of my business called Workerby. And Workerby is essentially the part that I'm most excited about, because it's really what I can provide for others. And it's really what most people want to connect with me on. But everything else just adds dimension to it. So Workerby started as like, my thought was, I'm a worker bee. I can do anything. I've got so many different areas of focus. And then it really turned into this idea that there's honor in all the steps it takes to make something happen. And I've really focused in on the creative process. So with that, it's like, there are so many elements. It's not just painting a picture and you're creative. There's the planning process, there's the iteration process, and it takes people or roles in every area to do that. And so a lot of the work that I do is through Workerby. And I also became a beekeeper a couple years ago. And I know that's something that you and I bond on, is just this hive metaphor as well. And it's so legit, there is just this, there's the sweetness, if I can say that, but also to providing good structure for things to get done. I'm a big believer that creativity thrives on the right kind of structure. And so how we look at the agreements we make when we enter into, let's say, a hive per se, or a swarm of, we have this collective, and each individual has their roles that they sometimes share, sometimes trade off, but things that they can own, I think it can be so solid for helping people understand their value as an individual and what they bring to any collaboration. And so over the years with the Gray Matter series, it has it's been a platform for testing different strategies out and seeing how people play together. What I do is I take people, and this does kind of weave into marketing for sure, take people in the creative industries that just want an outlet, and then we play. We have maybe a collective vision. And so I've been able to work with tremendous photographers and stylists and designers to make some really remarkable um, components happen. And we've been able to create a whole lot of beauty just by just through play, but it's all about having the good structure. So with Workerby, I've got all of these ideas and I'm testing all these things out, but I like to work in groups, like in the collective idea. I work with small groups and I work with individuals. And with the individuals, I do human design readings, I do energy portraits, and I do intuitive coaching. And it's really about helping people hone who they are and help them understand that they don't have to fit in anywhere. They just need to really get clear on who they are, what their vision is, how they want to work with others. And then holding space for this small group, let's work together to support each other. Let's work together to support each other in going deeper in who we are and then relate that. So there's this other element that I've brought in a couple years ago, and I think it was just months before, or it happened months after we closed the mastermind that we were in, that I found this space, that it's a house that I rented. It felt so ridiculously big, but now it's perfect. There was place for my bees. There's a place that used to have an antique shop in the back that I've kind of turned into a makeshift, really scrappy art gallery. And then the house itself hosts artist residencies, different workshops. I've got a library that I'm building out. And so it's about creating that hive structure for people to start gathering. And so for the last couple of years, it's really been kind of unfurling into its own entity, but it's driven by the principles of Workerby. So all of these different areas work together, but trying to call it a niche, I guess my niche would be creativity and community. Those still feel pretty broad, but those are the driving factors for me, is creativity and community. And so the art house itself is, I'm hoping to turn it into its own nonprofit entity so that others can begin investing in it in new ways, and that I can build the type of structure that it's not just me driving it. Maybe I'm the steward right now, but building it in a way that allows more people to have opportunities to grow within it, and potentially pass it on if I decide I need to move on to something else. Because I'm really recognizing, in partnering with my creative self, my creative process, partnering with this house that I'm in, we begin to be in conversations with these elements that it might feel really nonlinear. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced, you can tell your business wants something new from you through different things that happen. And I've just been working on really allowing for that. So it's interesting because okay, here's another branch, but it's also a branch that I'm willing to share with others and pass on. So that really comes from this idea of being in a collective hive, that we all have to do our part, you know?
Yeah. And that everyone else has their different roles as well. I mean,
Yes.
in terms of the art house, it's there's other people who maybe want to invest and spend some time, but they don't want to be the host or facilitator of certain things. So it allows for them to be involved without them having to also do everything. And so then you don't have to do everything. And so it just kind of all works
Hmm.
together like a hive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. And I like that of niching, not in terms of like one single offer that you really niche down your target audience. It's more about niching down on a couple of values and that
Yes.
everything orientates around that. Um, yeah, and that in a way that's niching and focusing, but it's in a way that fuels you rather
Hmm.
than putting a part of yourself on a shelf and saying, well, that part isn't relevant to my business, so therefore that's just part of my
Yeah.
other life or a part that I kind of like leave out essentially.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
be honest, a year ago, I tried that because I've been taking advice. You get all this advice on, from all the experts, right? And I'd really been encouraged to niche, on my offering of creative guidance sessions. And it actually left me feeling really high and dry. I, um, I felt it was difficult. I don't want to say I felt desperate, but I just felt like parts of me were withering because I was only focusing on one piece. And I find that I gain so much strength, but also what feels like I can build energy within and find ways to connect with people if I'm kind of holding multiple things. Not only for myself, but it allows other people to do the same. You know, ooh, I like how you're talking about your 5 things, but it all seems to kind of make sense. And that hasn't come without a lot of practice. And I'll say, like, probably the biggest thing that has contributed to that is maybe just very regularly sending out a newsletter. Like, even if I miss a couple of weeks, sending a newsletter. And so over time, those who kind of stick around or sign up recognize like, here are all these things that are happening. And it all comes back to community and creativity.
Yeah, perfect. And I think too, there's an element of like, especially being a woman, you are told throughout most of your life that you should be
Yeah.
something. You
Hmm.
should oftentimes take up less space, be quiet, do XYZ, and it doesn't serve us. So why listen to anything else that we kind of hear or are told?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's that thing of like, just because something has worked for somebody else doesn't mean it will work for you. Um, and even sometimes just because something works for your business doesn't mean it works for you personally. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's that too.
Agreed. I have always benefited from word of mouth. Like that is the core of how I work. I've benefited most from like just personal connection. And so getting online and like doing a reel and talking is difficult for me because what I need is the connection. So for me, this is perfect. Talking to you, it's like I can, I'll post this because it's like, okay, we're having the conversation. And and if I'm just like saying it to one person or saying it to a camera, I'm not getting the piece that I need to make it feel magical. But I could
Yeah.
talk one on one or small group like forever, and I just feel like that's where the magic happens. And I'm talking like magic with a capital M. I believe in like the power of connection is like what like shifts everything, what lights us up, what makes more possible. I'm all about, like I said, collaboration is just the result of community and creativity honed beautifully, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So along the way, how have you in terms of that, how have you decided what you don't do? Like even with you've niched down to accessories, how have you gone through that process of essentially trying things and deciding what doesn't work?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great question because I have tried so many things. Um, with the human design piece that I've been focusing on, I've been able to understand for myself, kind of in retrospect, the process that I've gone through of like, oh, this actually, like this is supposed to be great, but it feels awful. Now I have some tools to say yes and no. I'm also, I think, at an age too where, woman gets into her 40s and she's so much more willing to say no. And I have all kinds of enthusiastic yeses, and like when we were connecting about this, it's like, oh, hell yes. a chance to talk to you, perfect. But I have worked in many different areas of the fashion industry, from technical design to, and the like different product categories. And I think it's like when you feel that kind of reciprocity and flow, when you're like, oh, this is great. Because to me, it's less about the product and more about the people. So one of my main clients is in China, and I've been working with them for 10 years, and I have like a 6-month contract with them. And I love working with them because we've just built this rapport. The product's fun, right? It's like kids' accessories. I mean, that's kind of sweet. But when I work with them, it's like we have this trust built up over years. And to be able to, well, we message a lot in the middle of the night. It's a midday for them, I mean, how that goes, where
Yep.
working with people around the globe. And it's just gotten to this point where it's like I can like send them some messages, they know what I mean, and like it's taken a long time to get there, but to me, like, I will work with them for as long as I can because I love that connection. I less design for them and more I'm like a cultural translator for them, so help them understand the trends, help them understand some of the requests that we're getting. And I mean, certainly I design, but why I like it is about having an impact in connection. And there have been so many moments in my life where I have felt on the outside, so many moments in my life where I have felt like I just don't feel appreciated for the knowledge I have. And so it's having the courage to find something new and to recognize like it doesn't always have to feel like this. But I endured so many shitty jobs over the years, terrible situations, and it really wasn't all that bad. But the people are really what make it worthwhile. I have recently made a decision to take a break from the millinery work. And a big piece is I recognize the biggest thing I offer to people is reflecting them. And that was something I loved about making hats. It's like I could design a hat for anybody. It would kind of be like their color or something that looked good on them. But I am so much more energized by this idea of reflecting someone's truth back to them, of like what's going to help them work through a creative hurdle. So I've shifted from product to really like process and helping folks really connect more deeply to themselves. And that takes care of a couple things. I have so many hats in my studio down the hallway that I never sold. I've invested a lot in it, and I will continue to make hats. But I don't think my business will ever be about trying to sell another hat. Also, working in mass manufacturing, I've been in spaces where there are thousands and thousands and thousands of hats. And I'm like, okay, these are going to people around the world, and this is a lot of hats, so coming to terms with certain things within the fashion industry, and being part of an industry that is part of our, I guess, global climate crisis. I've really wanted to make some choices that are better aligned there as well. So right now I'm in the space where it's like, yes, I'm aligned. And to get to this place was a whole lot of really questioning things and wondering like, which foot do I put in front of the other? Because there are so many options, and there are also, and this is something that I think is hard to come to terms with for a lot of creative folks, because like, okay, you'll have this high paying job and it's part of the problem, but how else are you going to pay your bills? So we're all part of the machine. And I think it's a great privilege to decide which part of the machine you want to be in or how you want to engage with the machine. And over time, bit by bit, I've been able to get to a place where I'm doing things a bit more on my terms. I've watched others make bolder steps and align completely, and I've watched others not even care, So again, it really becomes like you have to align to yourself and your your values, and the things that are most important to you.
Mm. Yeah, especially like when it comes to, business, life, all of those things, there is elements that you can't control. And so
Yeah.
focusing on the things that you can control and saying, okay, well, I'm going to go this way because I don't necessarily like that thing. And I'm just going to work and live in this space while making certain decisions so that
Hmm.
essentially you can still feel good about it without, having to go out and live in the woods and not communicate with anybody and live completely off the grid, because sometimes it's just not realistic. And also like trying things and seeing, um, you know, you might like the idea of something, and then when it comes down to it, it doesn't really quite work out the way you thought it would.
Hmm.
Um, or being okay with letting things go and trying something else, and each of those decisions is kind of like a bold move in and of itself, because you are having to, like, there's only so many things you can do. So at some
Hmm.
point there becomes a decision of, okay, I don't want to do that thing anymore, or I want to try this new thing, so therefore there's only so many things. And then also that thing of, in this world that we live in, there's kind of like these eras of different formats, like bringing it back to marketing, of like reels might not be the thing. And so therefore, this isn't the time for like certain expansions and growth and whatever. But if you focus on other things that are available to you, what I'm noticing is when there are these trends happening, because there are more and more platforms, we have the choices. So it's
Hmm.
like, while TikTok is having a moment, YouTube is having their own moments in lots of different types of areas. So like there's the Mr. Beast spend $40 million to make a video situations. And then there's the people who will, just document their day, and both
Yeah.
can exist, and both can drive different people in different directions.
Hmm.
And it's finding, the thing that works for you while also, you know, working for other people and the people you want to work with or what have you. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I
it's so
love what
amazing.
you say about the dichotomy of like you can be on two different ends of the spectrum of content creators, and that they can both exist is really remarkable to me. And I think that it's the best thing about the internet. The best thing about the resources that we have is that it does turn into, you can play with this. I think I get really bummed out by trends. And it's so funny because I've worked as a trend researcher forever. I shouldn't say forever, but over the last like 10, 20 years, I've watched trends and I've worked with them. And whether it's within a group working together, or it's a macro trend that's happening, that is impacting global economies, which are impacting fashion, right? But I just feel like so much creativity gets lost in trends because everybody's copying each other. And in a way, it can be a really powerful way to get your message across in a way that everybody is like really open to receiving. But I also feel like it can really dampen the message. And I think you were just posting about this the other day, where it's like, if you follow the trends, yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot and putting that in there into my thought process of how do you work with it really well. Anyway, maybe at this point we could like direct people to that post that you made, because I thought I love your posts. I think that they're so valuable and direct. Um, but utilizing trends in ways where it's like, all right, this will reach the most amount of people, but I can still bring creativity to it. Because when I'm going through Reels or TikTok and I keep hearing the same song over and over, or that darn Wes Anderson trend, where it's like, you know what?
Oh my
I'm not
goodness.
even going to look at it anymore. Not interested. Like, if do something that's actually going to be engaging, and they're stinking cute. All of the Wes Anderson like trend reels and stuff like that. They're adorable, but I got over it so fast, you know.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I think probably a lot of people did.
Yeah, the thing about that trend was that, like, the real, like, there's the Wes Anderson visual aesthetic, and then there's the Wes Anderson storylines things. And I saw
Hmm.
so many of those videos that didn't tell a story.
No.
So it was like, whatever day, whatever week, a shot of them like standing somewhere, but like you have no idea who they are, what they're doing. Maybe they're making a coffee or something, but like, you know, Wes Anderson is a filmmaker, so he's telling stories.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the piece that got lost, was that people were using the visual aesthetics and like the text and things like that, but um it is like a watered down
Hmm.
version of the influence.
Yeah.
And then your influence is then that watered down version, and then it just becomes a whole thing. Whereas if it had been like when it was an original idea from somebody, it was really interesting.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
once it becomes an iteration of an iteration of an iteration, it's not as interesting anymore. And
Yeah.
also potentially isn't as aligned with the person who's creating the content and what they do. Like, there's a certain element of all of those people making those reels. Like, I can't really identify the differences between any of them, really. I mean, also you get to a point where you're not really paying attention to it. And so therefore none of them really stood out.
Hmm.
I'm sure I could research and figure out who the first person was that did it, but like, obviously I probably don't care enough to do that.
You got more important things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I didn't learn anything about anyone. I didn't It's not the kind of content that's going to make me go follow someone, because it's a trend, and so therefore next week they're not going to have a Wes Anderson aesthetic in their content.
Yeah.
So it's that thing of like, it just doesn't it's like a fun project to pick up and do, but it's
Hmm.
not necessarily I think as effective as people would hope it would be. um yeah.
I did see one that I really enjoyed, and it was somebody like setting it up, but each segment you'd see them actually being a little frantic, or like, no, 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 like, catch me like this. And so it's like, because everybody who's working on capturing that aesthetic is being that person behind the scenes. It's like, no, I'm not, like, I need to be perfectly framed, and it
Yeah.
was hilarious. It's like, no, we're done. We're done. And I was like, okay, here we go. I will watch that one.
Yeah. Also, I think that is like the Wes Anderson thing. Like, I think when that trend was first going around, I saw something that was like an audio clip of him, like, possibly like yelling at someone, being like, if it's not symmetrical, it's not going in the film. So there's no, like, what are we doing here? If it's not symmetrical, so he's like giving people feedback of like, this is not accurate. And that is translating to the, two people who are trying to make this real, who, there's
Yeah,
not a 40 person team eyeing this up correctly. So in a way it's also very Wes Anderson.
yeah,
At least
absolutely.
I would be like freaking out about the symmetry of it. It was like, this whole aesthetic is based off of this, it needs to be correct. Yeah.
And I like Wes Anderson films. I do feel like they've become a caricature in themselves,
Mm.
but I feel like some of his older, like, not to be that person, but I think some of his older pieces were far more odd and distinct, and I enjoy, I can enjoy his body of work for sure.
Yeah. I think there's also a thing with virality of like, when something becomes like mass market popular, does it mean that it was slightly watered down to fit people? Like, because I think,
Yeah.
yeah, his older films are, um, yeah, like less known, and
Hmm.
less loved, but um, they were like the original
Yeah.
concept. So yeah, sometimes being yourself is not mass market, and that's okay.
Well, one of the things that I was truly enjoying, and I'm seeing it less and less, was like anti-aesthetic. So, Gen Z just kind of like, a little bit of normcore, but also just like making things just ugly on purpose. And with fashion, I love it when things get weird. Like, I love those giant shoes. I love like all the things that are happening and the people just being really weird. I love it when people
Mhm.
get weird. I should preface that, but like fashion wise, and
Yeah.
not worrying so much about like social norms in the same way. And I think there was part of me, like there's been part of me that's been ready for it, during COVID and everybody was just so enclosed. Although I know you experienced it a little differently where you live, but I'm sure you had moments of enclosure and you were experiencing like any of your, if your clients were in another country, maybe experiencing some of that. But I was like, you know what? Things are going to get really weird when people get to like leave their homes. And I think we've seen some of that with fashion. I think we've seen some of that with just absurdism when it comes to maybe marketing. Also because it's like there's only so many things you can do to capture someone's attention, and so like the more absurd the better. And I love watching trends, like in, let's say you look at art history, and there's always this piece after things kind of reach perfection where things get really weird and kind of mannered, and like the proportions start to distort. And I feel like we're in that kind of space and have been for some time, that everything's just really kind of either bland or weird. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy it, because if there's no specific norm, then you can kind of do anything and anything is possible. So that's what's been really energizing me. And that's one of the things when I talk to people in their creativity, it's like, there's never been a better time to just be yourself and be your own weird self. I think there's greater acceptance for it. Certainly big picture, there are challenges to certain people being themselves. And that's why we have to fight for the right to be your own weird self, or your own like normal, specific, self of within like this broad spectrum of community.
Yeah, totally. I always like it when people are being their own type of weird, because it frees me up to be my own type of weird. And so the
Excellent.
more that happens, the more people can just be their own weird, authentic self. Um, and therefore they're not trying to like be, normal,
Yeah.
of any kind of thing.
One thing I've been doing at the art house, and we're reaching our 1 year anniversary, and it's something called the Bright Moon Ceremony. And it's this monthly gathering right before the full moon. And there's like no pressure to join if you're busy, if the full moon week has got you like crazy. Like no pressure. What I do is I bring folks together. We always have one honored guest, and that person just shows up with something they want to talk about. Or this upcoming month, we're going to have a watercolor workshop with a friend of mine who's doing a residency at the art house, and she'll be in town. And so it's going to be like, she's bringing watercolors and brushes and paper, and we're just going to learn how to paint roses. And I love it. And just whatever someone wants to share. There's always a circle element, so we all get a chance to like say how we're doing, or like go around and how are you arriving? Do you need any support? Do you want to celebrate anything? Because I feel like we spend so much time like in the past, like or maybe in the present, um, figuring out how to fit into a group. And I just want to cultivate what it means to be in a room full of beautiful weirdos, and a lot of introverts, people who like, however you want to share, that's totally fine. But more than anything, it's just showing up as yourself and feeling part of a collective. And each month, like I said, we have a different person who shares what they're excited about, shares something important about themselves that they want to like start a conversation about. And it allows people to just show up and be authentic in ways that just doing like a cocktail party doesn't. I
Mm.
actually refrain from having alcohol at it because I want people to just be. And we do mead like once a year, because we have the horn ceremony, which is about like speaking your truth to everyone. And that's coming up next month. It'll be our 1 year anniversary, because we initiated with a horn ceremony that was like quite literally is a Nordic tradition. And this is like a horn made out of a cow horn. And the woman who led us in it is a vulva, which is a Nordic staff carrying woman from the Bronze Age. And so, I mean, she's not literally from the Bronze Age, but she's done a lot of work around it. And she's somebody I've known since the early 2000s and has always inspired me to be like she is niched, she's got her era, she's got everything. And she's also found such an audience now, specifically during COVID, maybe a little bit before that, where for years she was just doing her thing and a few core people were really getting into it, or, she had her community, and now people are seeking her out because she has just doubled down on her niche, right? So we paid for her to come to the art house, and she led us in the horn ceremony. And that's what we initiated with, was this idea that we are who we are, and we are reflected back to each other, and then we are more of each other. Just like the moon shines because it's reflecting the sun. And so it's about that creativity and community. And it has been such a driving force in my life. But we now have just sent an email out today. We've got over 40 people that are engaged in the list. And then maybe it's 10 to 18 people show up each month. And I just love that, because one, if you miss a month or two, you're still part of the group, and the group is also always evolving, but we keep the core tenets the same. And it's really about being able to feel accepted in your truth. And I just feel like that in and of itself, it's I mean, I know we're here talking marketing, but I do not do any outward, I rarely post on Instagram or Facebook about the Bright Moon Salon. It has been 100%, oh my goodness, I just met somebody and I think they'd really benefit from this. And I think I get maybe 3 or 4 new people every month. And then there are people who are like, oh, it keeps happening on a Thursday and Thursdays aren't good. When it happens on a Monday again, I'll be able to be there, But this idea of word of mouth, but also word of mouth from the heart, has been really fascinating. And then also this ability to be involved without pressure. But this other element that we've been building in is I encourage everybody to bring a little bit of food to share. And that's turned into its own thing as well. I don't know if in New Zealand, do you have something called potlucks, or do you call it something else?
Yeah, potluck, BYO, whichever. A barbecue sometimes is just still expected that you'd bring something.
For sure. Yeah. I've fallen in love with this idea that if you ask everybody to bring something, they're so much more invested. It doesn't have to be money. It's just bring something to share. And then you've got a conversation starter, but also there's this whole other level of investment. And so we're working with resources beyond, money, and kind of building a sense of investment through just showing up and being seen. So I'm taking word of mouth marketing very seriously because I think because it's the biggest strength. And so now one of the things that I'm working on doing, and I'm in a lot of inquiry about it, and is how to translate all the things that are happening in real life or in the art house, and how to share that with people to try work up with that online. I am building a group of folks where we're going to be doing an online version of some of the workshops. And I feel the more the energy builds in the art house, the more likely I can build the online resources so that people in different parts of the world can engage. That it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think the two kind of rely on each other as well. But I don't know. I think that there's something about, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Emma. When you're sharing something outward online, do you think that there's something about grounding an idea, or being having your feet on the ground about it? Do you know what I mean? Where you're just I believe in this, and A lot of people believe in this. And then when you talk about it or you share about it online, it's received in an entirely different way.
Yeah,
You agree?
for
Yeah.
sure. And I think there's also an element of like, because you aren't sharing about the bright moon, it's about having kind of that word of mouth spread. So in a
Hmm.
way, as a group, you are curating the scaling of that group in a way where you have to be kind of tied to it to know about it. And that way there's like a certain amount of things you want to control in any kind of situation, is that once you have a set group of people that have established a format of doing things or anything like that, then an outsider comes in, there's a lot of facilitating that you have to do for that person. And so
Hmm.
then therefore if someone who is already coming invites a friend, they are the person that hosts them coming into the group rather than it all being on you as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I like that. But just in terms of it being, I think sometimes the grounding isn't necessarily the people who are physically around you. Sometimes it can just be having had that conversation and like verbally processed it fully before you go out and tell other people about it.
Hmm.
Um, so that it's like a fully formed 4D thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be thinking about that a lot, because it's like, what are the elements that allow for like truly being heard with the things that you're saying, you know? And like I said before, I've gotten a lot of great practical instruction from the things that you post, you know, as far as like, you're just going to do this and you're going to do this. And if you don't think about this, you might not have that, you know? And it's just like, yeah, that's really straightforward and perfect, you know? And so to break certain things down so that you can like, it's just like the structure that allows for magic, you know, the infrastructure that allows for things to flow and really like surprise and engage people.
Yeah. Yeah, and going back to that piece of creativity works really well with parameters, is that when you know kind of like the space that you're in, um, some of that mental block comes down and it allows you to be more creative. So, like, for example, if someone was trying to get into reels and they didn't understand how they were going to edit it, that first reel is going to be quite clunky. It's going to feel clunky to them and they're going to hold a certain amount of themselves back. And then that second, third, fourth, whatever, becomes more organic in a way because they
Hmm.
understand the parameters and then they get creative within that time limit or editing features or whatever. um Sometimes it's that coming back to what is the box and therefore then what can I do
Hmm.
that's unique in that box.
Yeah.
So that's perfect. One of the things that comes up a lot for me when I'm thinking of doing something new or like following my interest into something is like, how am I going to have the time to maybe learn the things that come along the way while also keeping up with the things that have happened before? So, how have you built the expertise that you have over the time of working both for yourself and developing all of these different skills that you have over your lifetime? How do you balance and like retain that information? Is it all just kind of like you follow your heart and it comes as it comes, or is it like any kind of like structure, or how are you like gaining all of this different sets of expertise? Like you've just added human design
Hmm.
more recently, and like there's certain elements of learning that come with that. So
Yeah.
how do you do it all?
Well, one of the things that's been really fascinating to me with this is like, especially if when I have more formless time, now that I kind of own my structures, and with that comes its own set of, you know, pressures and things like that. But if I don't have client work set up or I don't have a project set up, I just let myself be a little formless and see some
Mm,
of the things that come up. Like, I will go down a rabbit hole, no problem. And so a lot of it is just like, what has the lightning bolt behind it? You know, I love having my mind blown by new concepts, by new art. And I really seek out sensational experiences, if that makes sense. So whether it's something somebody said and it just like really stuck with me, I'm like, wait, that is intriguing. I think it was Brooke Golden, who's also in the Being Boss community, had mentioned human design to me. And she's like, I think you're a projector. And I'm like, what's that? And I looked into it and it just like opened up like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. Um, I'm a voracious learner. And so I have to be focused on the things that I do learn. In that, like, I could do a little bit of everything, but I have learned it is actually okay to do a little bit of everything. Whereas we were told, like, you've got to focus and just do one thing. I have recognized that the role of the artist is to be insatiable. We will always want to know more. We will always want to experience more. And so to say, I'm focusing on this thing and this thing only, I think is the death of creativity. To revel in and enjoy learning things and trying things and playing with things puts us in a position where we might look scattered on the outside, but we're actually just having a good time. I think there's a lot of shame built into the ways that we've been told we should be an artist. And a big thing I've learned in the last year in particular of just letting go of how I think my career should be and recognizing it's less that I'm a milliner and this and that and that. I'm an artist and I am a multidisciplinary artist and I'm going to try this thing and I'm going to try that thing. And when I work with a lot of creatives, I think I recognize that there are a lot of folks that say like, when am I just going to settle down? And I like to tell them, probably never, but the most important thing is to be grounded and to build structure around your process so that, let's say, for a couple years you do this thing and a couple years you do something else. Don't feel like you have to change your identity. It's be yourself, be the artist who has many interests. And once you like get a few years on and you're like, okay, like I'm in my mid 40s right now. It's like, I know a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of stuff. It's like, this is great. This is the beauty of aging. It's like, I've just gathered so much experience and I want to celebrate it, and just recognizing for me, shifting out of like this capitalist mentality where it's like, I have to be selling it. I have to be making the most of it. If I'm not selling it and making a profit, then it's pointless. It's like, okay, let's just take care of that right there. I have plenty of things that I never want to try sell again. One of the worst things for me is I really recognize that I'm an introvert and I pick up on just, the vibe of a place. It can impact my energy levels, and that I do not want to sit in another craft show, no matter how high end or how fun the other exhibitors are. I don't like trying to sell stuff. I love making things and I love sharing them. And I have a gallery at the art house that I have been like just putting stuff up in. I'll have my paintings and all my textiles, and I developed a line of lipsticks, which I know, I think you had the ruby versus the rosa. Mm-hmm. And so I've done like all these different things as experiments, and to really be able to just play with it instead of feeling like, okay, now I have to become a makeup designer too. What I have learned over time, though, is it can be really expensive to try and make all these little businesses. So instead, just having it a platform of experimentation.
Okay, so people, I got cut off. My internet decided it could not hang. or it could hang. Who knows? So I've changed rooms, I've changed cameras, I've changed audio. So hopefully I sound okay. But basically we cut Emily off and she was telling us all about how able to gain this expertise. Like when I'm trying to do something new, there's that learning process of how do I learn this new thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to keep up with the other things. And I'm like kind of a little bit struggling on how to kind of like maintain my old learning while doing this new thing. And
Yeah.
then also there's like a split of focus. How do you do all of the things?
Yeah. Well, I think a little bit over a lot of time. You know, I'm a big believer in iteration, where it's like if you just do something a little bit every day, it adds up. All that being said, whether or not we're pulling from the information that we were talking about before, um, I'm not afraid of going down a rabbit hole. Um, I also don't watch a lot of television or streaming services. I have very specific things that I do watch, and it takes a lot. I'm going to say before, it's like I love being fascinated. I love having my mind blown, and it takes a lot to do that. And so I'm always in a bit of inquiry. And if like a series or a movie or show can help me with that, like sure, no problem. But I don't waste my time on staying current with a lot of shows or anything like that. So that offers me a little bit more time to just dive in. So it's really about creating space for that. Let's say I have, an hour a day for inquiry. I've also been thinking about the beauty of contemplation. And that is going to lead to, if you can quiet your mind a little bit, like it, being okay with just letting yourself think about stuff and be in contemplation, to be in inquiry, to like, I wonder what would happen if, oh, then maybe I'll Google something, but also letting myself be in inquiry without connection to the internet. But I ask a lot of questions, and that leads me down some interesting rabbit holes or little chases, or paying attention to when themes start showing up. I also, with the work I do for my corporate design client, year round, I am taking in content to look at what's happening with fashion accessories, right? And so I'm always kind of have these filters of, ooh, I see that. Ooh, I see that. And I have almost like baskets to put everything in. And I like to really prioritize play with it, or silliness. I think I was mentioning before, I've learned that I don't have to make product out of anything. I love creating things, but I don't have to make something to sell. One hobby that I have is capturing images of vanity plates or personalized license plates on cars. I find it hilarious. Where I'm living right now, there is an inordinate amount of personalized plates. I think it's just less expensive. I think it also is one way people can show their individuality, and I love it. And when I can ask people like, why did you choose this? I get the greatest stories, right? So it's just like being in this space of, well, that's interesting to me. Why don't I just play with that for a little bit? And really about kind of creating patterns of like showing up to a thing, and letting conversations inspire me to like dive into something else. So last fall, I was traveling in Crete with a group of people, and one woman was taking Polaroids, and I loved it. I loved it. I've been taking Instax of myself for years, like almost every day, and just putting them in a journal. Like I take a photo, I pull a tarot card, I journal. It's just this way of tracking myself. And we got into this conversation about like, wouldn't it be fun to just do a show on instant photography? Well, I've got this art gallery that I'm kind of cultivating. So we put something together. I did a call for entry. I've got over 20 people from around the country that have submit instant photography with incredible stories. different eras, some people set up special projects for it. And I've got 400 pictures of myself on one wall, so it's just one of those things where it's like, if you think too hard about it, you plan too much, like maybe you don't follow through with the thing. But for me, I just make it this act of, are there things I'm returning to every day? I'm learning Greek, because on Duolingo, it's like, you just like do one lesson a day or more, And so building these little routines in my life also helps me separate the days, but gives me this structure to my creativity. And over time, all of a sudden, like you've got 400 Instax photos of yourself and you're putting them on a wall and like freaking everybody out. Like, that's a lot of you. But it's really just about committing to creativity and not needing it to be anything. It's just fun. But I've also recognized too, along with the not needing to make a business out of everything, even though I've got like several business kind of areas, is having the basket for, like, I did a line of lipstick. I, did a line of scarves that were created from my paintings, and the lipsticks were from like specific colors that were in my life at the time or inspired by different things. And recognizing I don't have to become a makeup company. I don't have to become a scarf company. It's really about having my main driving force of my income, like my contract work for design. And now my creative guidance sessions are really picking up steam and becoming they're holding their own, right? But allowing time for that, for like these little incubators that I create. So it's like, I fund all of my projects. I'm constantly in incubator mode. So I never have to like turn it into a business. It just becomes the play that informs the business, the play that that keeps things interesting for me. I have had to learn how to create a balance between that versus thinking, oh, I could start this and I could do that. I've gone through a lot of iterations, but and I should say, I've also gone through eras where people are like, what do you even do? And I'm like, I don't quite know. And I'll be honest, a big part of me not knowing was not being convinced myself that I could just be an artist, that I could just be these things. The other element with that is when you have this idea of the thing you want to build, and this is what's tripped me up a couple times in the past with marketing. I've got this idea for a business, but I'm doing these other things. How do I build the business and build like the branding and the marketing when things don't exist yet, when they're all just these like ideas? Because I'm really good at like taking ideas, talking to people about it. It's like, oh, I guess I better do it, right? I love the idea of making something out of just ideas, from conversations, and making it real. But the true collaboration that comes from having just enough grounded so that I can work with somebody on the idea or a group of people without changing in the midst of it. And that's been a challenge, where I will have this original idea, and as I'm working with a team to kind of build my branding or build a website, it's like, oh wait, now it's going to become this thing. And that's, I'm sure, like the most infuriating thing for anybody who's like working with a creative. And that's something that I've learned to be like, that's where I actually became more comfortable with my business being me, and that whatever I decide to do, it's going to become these different things. And that was a big shift. This other element was actually getting a space to house my ideas instead of just kind of pretending I was anywhere in the world. And because I was having a hard time reckoning with where I was living. Once I put my roots down and said, I am at this house, this is where you will find me, this is where everything's going to happen. That's what I was saying earlier about the, like, once you ground the idea, it's so much easier to talk about it. So it's like, I had to be convinced, and it took a while to get there. I feel like I'm in a better place than I ever have been because I'm convinced that what I'm doing is for real,
Yeah. Oh, that's so perfect. I think, and as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking of all of these things that I've kind of put to the side in a way of like, this isn't accurate for the current business, so therefore it can't happen. Instead I can look at it like it's a project that I'm working on, and it doesn't have to be monetizable. It doesn't have to be part of this business. It doesn't have to be like Honeypot Digital Trading as. It doesn't have to be um really anything. It just has to be it can be a hobby and still have like a presence and all of those things that I want it to have. But it doesn't have to be like the next thing. And it doesn't have to be that I'm pivoting away from Honeypot Digital to do this thing. I can have
Exactly.
two things going at the same time, one of which may or may not be monetizable at all. And otherwise, there can be a dot that connects the passions, but it doesn't have to be so clear that it all comes under one brand umbrella.
Absolutely. And it's the fuel for your fire, really. When you have the play that, where it's like, this doesn't have to be anything, I'm just interested in it. That is its own currency. Human excitement is its own currency. It fuels other things. It keeps you excited. It keeps you magnetizing, right? Because you are lit up about what you are enjoying doing, and over time, maybe you see a way to weave it together, but for it to never have that pressure makes it fun, and it's like, it's fun to be surprised by how life then unfolds. But I think there's this other element then too of just giving other people permission to do the same, you know um, I think that we're in this really fun era where people are recognizing all the systems that have been built that we feel like we should fit into are crumbling or have problems. And I dare say, like, every industry is going through massive change. So what we need now is more people playing. We need more people in inquiry. We need people just not giving up on their creative selves, because we need to find solutions. And solutions are found when you're not worrying about it too much. You are just playing. And that is my mission, is to create environments for us to think about new ways of being. As, I mean, this is going to sound really dramatic, but I think more people understand it now than ever. It's like, as our world crumbles, we need to be building something at the same time. And if all we have is creativity and connection and community, that is a beautiful start, because then we have each other, we have our ideas, and we have that fire inside of us that allows us to see things in new ways, and still maintain an element of joy and connection when things feel really difficult.
Yeah, and the thing of like, you hear of a lot of people, particularly at the moment, maybe being made redundant or things like that.
Yeah.
And they've fit themselves into this box, and then the box isn't there anymore, or the box has
Mm-hmm.
fallen apart essentially, and they have this reckoning moment of like, what was I doing?
Yeah.
And hopefully they have a comfortable spot to land while they go through that process of what is next. But oftentimes the things that do remain through those kind of changes are that like connection and community.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometimes not with the one-on-one, but like as the collective, it comes together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so important. Yeah, so inspiring. I have so many thoughts of all the things that I can do next, of like just like let go of the stuff,
Yeah.
or the things I've been told, or the things I've told myself, and just roll with the things that feel the best.
Absolutely. I have a worksheet for the listeners. And do you mind if I kind of walk through it? Because if you're in the space of possibility, this would be a great time to talk about how I see the creative process. And when we can recognize how we feel it in our bodies, it shifts so many things. Now, and I've shared this with the Being Boss community at a different event, but it really opens a lot of possibilities for people when they understand that they can decipher where they are in the creative process or where they're stuck just by tuning into their body. Am I cool to proceed?
Mhm.
Because I'm going to speak linearly about a very nonlinear process, right? We're going to go from top to bottom, quite literally, and it's following the chakra system. But I also, like we can call them energy centers, but they really hold universal truths about the part of our body where we feel things, so when we have an idea or when we have an insight, it's literally like that light bulb moment, right? And it's that seventh chakra, like, whoa, I'm connected. I had this idea. Our sixth chakra, we begin to see in our mind's eye, or we hear it, or we smell it, just the senses being able to project what's possible, right? So once we can perceive it, we can speak it. And that is at our fifth chakra. It's about communication. And that's when things really start to feel like they're possible. It's important to tune into our heart center, our fourth chakra, because the passion that we have can really drive it forward. When we speak, we can allow other people to see it in their mind's eye. So this is where I've been at with so many ideas and projects where it's like, I can speak it. It doesn't exist yet. Oh shoot, let's nail it down before it becomes something else, So anyway, when we get here and we're like talking about it and we feel great about it, then the next step is to go to our third chakra. And we don't have a full body like camera here, but it's just right below the rib cage. And that's where a lot of ideas get stuck. If anybody's ever had a stomach ache about something or anxiety, it's where we get stuck because we don't know how we're going to move it forward. So there are different solutions depending on like where we're at different parts of our body. But really the biggest thing we can do when we get stuck, in our gut is to make a list. This is where the voices show up saying, who do you think you are? Do you think you could really do this? This is a bad idea. But really it's just these internal filters like saying, are you sure you want to do this? Because we all know we have like 100 ideas any given day, and we're not actually supposed to make all ideas happen. Not all inquiries are supposed to happen. So it's almost like this like filter of like, are you sure? And what I like to do when I start hearing the negative voices is like, oh, I'm sure. Yes. And these are the reasons why. So when we recognize that's what's going on, it's really important to just meet it with our knowledge and awareness of this is just part of the process. This is where imposter complex hangs out, where it's like, who are you to do this? And it's like, oh, let me tell you who I am. So this is where like the self-awareness and just being dedicated to your process is super important. And then, the second chakra is the center of creativity and sexuality and like just our kind of like our core energy. And this is why it's so important to play, because if we aren't letting ourselves be in a space of inquiry and just creating for creation's sake, we might feel really depleted and burnt out. If we are working too hard and asking too much of our creativity without feeding it with play, we get burnt out. And so when we just don't have it in us to do anything, we don't know what we want. We don't even know what we want for dinner. It's so important to just do sometimes like the beautiful things, the silly little things, have like a little dance party, do things to support your senses and just play so you can fill the cup, right? And then when it comes to our first chakra, it's at the base of the spine. And that really is about survival. And so for so many folks, this is a really big deal, because if we don't know how we're going to pay rent, we don't know how we're going to do, meet certain like pressures. And a lot of the times the fears we have around survival can be real. They can also be unfounded. When we're in a collective space of fear, it is so difficult to be creative. There's a reason why at the beginning of COVID, it's like people are like, I'm just going to rest. I'm not like, there was just, and especially I think that first year, there was just this dearth of creative activity. And a lot of people were just kind of like in this zone, and they were just kind of like taking in things or just maybe feeling a little numb. And it's because we were collectively ungrounded. And so if you're feeling like your survival is challenged, yeah, it's hard to bring the idea into the world. And so that is called the current of manifestation. And on the worksheet that I have for the listeners too, there's also something called the current of liberation. And it really means that the flow that we're talking about in these different energy centers, chakras, there needs to be flow up and down, because really we're bringing information in from the earth and really kind of releasing it to the universe as well. We're here not only to make things happen, but we're here to just experience the joy of being on this planet as human beings. So I know I went a little more to the woo here, but this is how I have learned to understand the creative process and speak to others on how to really bring awareness and a sense of embodiment to the creative process, because we all get stuck. I still get stuck. It's just about awareness, and then having a few tools. And those are listed in the worksheet as well. It's like, here's some things you can do to nurture this chakra, this energy center. And recognizing that we're not alone. Whenever we get stuck, it is the loneliest feeling. We rarely think, oh, I'll bet everybody's struggling with this thing. No, we're like, I have writer's block and I'm the only one. Or at least that it feels really lonely. It's like, why? What's wrong? Why do I have this? It's like, well, you might just need to go have a nice little meal, and then have a dance party and then return, I know I've simplified it there, but we only have so many minutes. So
Well, and the other thing about all of that is that as much as it is quite woo, it's also that there are so many like mainstream sayings and things like that we have that essentially just have unwooified that whole process of like light bulb moment, frog stuck in your throat, your gut feeling,
yeah.
any of those kind of things have just taken the woo out of it, and that's the piece that's gone like mainstream. But when you think of it as, I mean, like the full body, and sometimes I think of a business like an ecosystem, is that that holistic piece brings it back in and centers it and grounds it a little bit more than just like the saying having a light bulb moment will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think one reason why I love sharing this is that it really is fundamental. We all experience these things in our bodies, and it is true. It's not like I'm saying, oh, like, and while there are chakras, in our hand, it's like all your good ideas are going to come from right here, or like this part of your face. It's like, no, there are like very classic universal experiences of the creative process, of the energy centers, that I think really kind of tie us all together in our understanding of being creative.
Yeah, totally. Also, another thing that kind of stuck with me earlier when you were saying possibilities. So the
Yes.
thing that comes to mind for me so often is like the potential and the like unrealized potential, and like sometimes you feeling like you're not able to share or document or fulfill that potential. But when you think of it like a possibility, it just kind of
Mm-hmm.
opens it up a little bit more. There's less pressure.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all about utilizing pressure in the right ways, like we can languish without pressure,
Mhm.
but too much pressure kills any idea. So it's like that, it's that ecosystem of having the right things in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And sometimes even that is just having a conversation with someone and letting them
Hmm.
hold space. And when you go too far in one direction, that they pull you back in. And
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I think what's beautiful about everything that we've just talked about is that it's not like literal marketing talk, and yet it all relates so much to marketing. Um, so yeah, this has been amazing. And I will have to have you back to talk about all of the different things, because there is like, so many topics of conversation here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But let's wrap it up and go through the quickfire round.
Okay.
Just some inspiring questions for everyone. So, who inspires you in business?
I'll be honest. Right now, Emily of Being Boss is totally inspiring me with how she's making these shifts and being so connected about it and so aware and really letting people in on the process. And she's always just really inspired me as well.
Cool. What creative pursuit are you enjoying or feeling drawn to right now in your work or personal life?
Oh my goodness. I'm listening to the bees in entirely new ways. And that has been a shift where instead of trying to figure them out, I'm listening. And I feel like this is in line with like also like listening to other people more distinctly too. It's like, what are they truly saying versus me trying to intellectualize anything? So I had an experience the other day where I was checking the bees, and I've been just trying to slow down, and I heard the general buzz, and then I heard this higher pitch. It was like boo, where it was regular, it was just like boo. And I'm like, what is going on? And I honed in on this little bee doing a waggle dance. And I was like, that is remarkable because I did not know the waggle dance. I mean, I know it's sharing information. I didn't realize it had its own sound. And so like a creative pursuit really has been like listening and being in awareness. But when it comes to just like play and I've really been getting into watercolors again.
That's amazing. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So what is your favorite place on the internet right now?
Oh my goodness. I have been diving into gene keys beyond human design. And there are some resources that I just recently spent some time with that actually require good stretches of contemplation. And so it feels like this well that I keep dipping into that has no pressure for me. But when I'm ready, I can go back to it. And that feels like a new way of interacting with the internet is just being in a space of taking what I need when I need it.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are you looking forward to the most in the next year of business?
I'm really excited for deepening the group work that I'm doing at the creative guidance sessions. I was recently certified to do partnership readings. So seeing how two human design charts are going to impact each other. The relationship itself has its own chart, which is really cool. But I love how we all interact and impact each other. But I've also started doing small group classes. So instead of doing coaching one-on-one, it's like a group of 3 to 6 people being kind of coached together, or I'll work through some of my my previous workshops, or we'll dive into an element of human design. It's really informed by the people who are attending, what they want to know more of. So the next class will always be like informed by the previous one. And I'm finding that it's more affordable for individuals, but I still get paid and the rate that I'm looking for. And I think that there's a deepening in how people work with the information. And it's been in person, and I'm looking forward to starting some online options as well.
That's cool. I'll be looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
And what are you looking forward to the most in the offline world in the next year?
Gardening a little bit more. It's been really warm here, and we've had some of the wildfire smoke. But I have some big ideas when I have the energy and have the right environment for it. But just really diving into pollinator gardening and also building a dye garden so I can do fabric dyeing with the plants.
That's exciting. Amazing. If someone is listening to this episode and they want to grow their own business, what is one thing that you recommend they do or evaluate right now?
Yeah. Um, it's so interesting to I don't like the term follow your bliss, but there's something to it. It's like, well, what is the core of you, and how can you build a business being the most you can be in a way that doesn't take too much from you. So it's like how to be yourself in reciprocity. Another thing that I always would share with design students or art students is take some business classes, because you can have the best ideas, and if you don't understand how to build a business around it, then you're just missing a really big piece.
That's so amazing. No, I'm thinking what I'm drawn to is all of the creative workshops and learning, because I am that practical person. This has been amazing, and I needed this clearly without even knowing it. So this has been so inspiring and clarifying for me. So thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. It's an absolute honor. I love your work, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Hive podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend or on Instagram and tag me at Honeypot Digital. To find out more about Honeypot Digital and the work I do, or to find more episodes of the podcast and handy tips for small businesses marketing online, head to honeypotdigital.com.